Welcome
Welcome
to another limited overview on Windmill Slam.
the #1 resource if you don't have 6 hours to learn about Kaladesh.
Oh, that was a dig.
It's not a dig. It's not a dig.
That was a little dig.
It's less in depth, but it's
We just
exactly equally as useful.
This is the idea of these. We say this at the top of every one. The idea of these is if you don't have the time to put a ton of your own research into the format before you go to your pre-release or your first draft or whenever it is you first get your hands on the cards, you can have a listen to this. And we'll
get you thinking about the set, get the gears turning, get the juice flowing, and just
gears
get
turning.
Hey!
The gear hulk's turning. We mostly go. We don't really focus on the rares and the mythics because they don't tend to impact the draft format as much, and that's what we're mostly focused on. But we'll be going through kind of a lot of the things you'll be seeing draft in and draft out.
Just so you're not going in blind.
Exactly. So where we normally start with these kind of things is new mechanics or returning mechanics in the set.
In which case we have no returning mechanics.
There's no returning
and
mechanics.
all new mechanics.
Exactly. Only 3 new mechanics.
Yes.
Which that's about average, isn't it?
Yes, but 2 of them are very weird.
2 of them are very weird, and one of them
is kind of boring. Yeah. So we'll start with the boring one.
We'll start with the boring one. It's Fabricate.
Fabricate is Fabricate X on a creature.
Fabricate, it's always on a creature, I believe.
And that means you can either have that creature enter the battlefield with that many +1/+1 counters, or you put that many 1/1 servo artifact creature tokens onto the battlefield.
Exactly.
So also what's important to note is if a creature has Fabricate 2, you can't do one of each.
No, you have to choose one. Now it is a triggered ability on it entering the battlefield. It's not entering the battlefield with the counters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not nitpicking, but that is important because
There's
it's a window where it can be killed with a burn spell that wouldn't hit it after.
You also check upon resolution.
What do you mean?
Like if
you choose on resolution. Yeah, you choose.
So like if you play your guy and the Fabricate triggers on the stack and your opponent goes, kill your creature, you still get your servo.
Yeah. It uses the new create keyword.
Yeah, instead of saying put a creature token blah 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 onto the battlefield, it just says create a servo token.
Create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token.
Still doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but it's taken a couple of syllables out of the process.
It's fairly straightforward. Evaluate the creatures as if their Fabricate number was added to their cost. But they're a little better than that because if it's more useful to you, you can choose to have servos instead.
Which I think is almost always going to be the case.
Having servos is going to be better.
Upwards of 90% of the time, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't know.
We had that card. What was that? 2-mana, 3-mana, 2/1.
And you always got but I mean that make flyers.
Still, this makes artifacts.
The artifact thing is relevant. You're going to have to look at the board state and decide what's going to be.
Sure, I'm not saying always, but I think my default state is to be servoing up.
That's fair enough. That's reasonable, but the flexibility is really nice to have depending on the game state.
There's a couple of things that let you flicker things, exile them, bring them back, or bend them to your hand. That's really good if you have things that have Fabricate or have Fabricate 2. So that's
if you have things that require you to have artifacts in play, then creating servos.
The servos
that just sit on the battlefield is good, and they also can be used to crew vehicles.
Vehicles, yes, which is a new card type.
Card subtype.
Yes.
New card subtype. It's an artifact subtype. So you'll see artifact vehicles running about. There's actually not as many as I thought they were.
No, there are 7 common or uncommon ones.
Yeah, and 4 rarer mythics. So the way crew works is you'll play a vehicle,
which is an artifact that has power and toughness, but is not a creature.
Which is super weird. So when you're looking at this in your packs or in your hand, please bear in mind that they are not by default creatures. They do have power and toughness printed on them, but that comes into it later.
Your vehicle needs a driver.
So for example, Sky Skiff is a 2-mana, 2/3-ish.
Oh, you did air quotes.
I did air quotes. I realised we're not filming this. And it's got flying, and it has crew 1. So it says tap any number of creatures you control with total power 1 or more. I'm going to guess that's going to be 1 creature.
I would imagine. It can actually be more if you like.
It can be, yeah. This vehicle becomes an artifact creature until end of turn.
So, important to note that if you want to attack with your vehicle, you have to crew it in your begin combat step.
Or in your
main,
or
your upkeep or whatever, yeah.
You cannot do it during the declare attackers step because the first thing that happens in declare attackers is
declaring attackers. And you can't attack with it if it's not a creature. Exactly. That means the shortcut that we often use where we go attacks is too late.
It's a little dodgy, yeah.
Now, at your pre-release and usually at your FNL, it's going to be fine. But if you're playing at a GP or a PPTQ, if you go attackers, the implication there is that you're passing priority towards attackers, and if your opponent says okay, you can't crew your vehicles.
You can no longer crew your vehicles. So
just do it during your main phase.
Get used to saying the words begin combat instead of attacks.
Or just do it during your main phase.
That's also an option.
Another thing to note is that you can crew a vehicle way higher than its crew cost is if you like.
If you want to tap creatures for whatever reason, I don't know why.
You can also do it. You can also crew a vehicle that's already a creature again, But again, that doesn't really matter. There's one card in the set where that matters.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that you can crew vehicles with vehicles that are creatures.
Yeah, you can get your goblin into your car and you drive the car onto the airship. That's fine.
Yeah, that's totally fine. That's a totally legal play. A little bit of a flavor fail, but
that's fine.
Yeah, you just drive the car onto the barge onto the airship.
Yeah.
Okay, that's reasonable.
I'll do an MS Paint diagram.
So in terms of the power level of this mechanic, now obviously when I say power level of the mechanic, you need to evaluate the cards individually. But the thing to be thinking about with this, don't look at the card and see 2 mana 2/3 flyer.
Yes.
Because that's not what this is.
It is if you're willing to essentially sacrifice 2 power of creatures for the rest of the game.
Exactly. And if, for example, you only have 1 creature in play, you play a vehicle, and then your creature gets killed, very close to a 2-for-1, tempo-wise.
For the time being, yeah.
Because now, when we were chatting earlier, when Dennis and I were chatting earlier before the show, the closest comparison I can think of for something you would have seen before is equipment.
It is quite similar to equipment.
Now, there are obviously lots of differences, but it's sort of like saying,
if you have no creatures, your equipment does nothing.
Yeah.
You have to go all in to put your equipment on a creature. In this case, you're just putting your creature on the vehicle.
Yeah, it turns your less relevant creatures into more relevant threats.
The only thing is, if something goes wrong with an equipment, you use your creature. If something goes wrong with the vehicle, you tend to lose the vehicle
instead of the creature.
Yes.
So it's
which may be better or worse.
Yeah. But so that's a good way when you're kind of looking at the power level of it.
Yeah.
So for example, this isn't really a 2 mana 2/3 flyer. It's a +1/+2 and flying equipment. Do you know? Which like that's the way I've been trying to evaluate these, and I'm not sure how that's going to go. It's a very difficult mechanic to evaluate because we've never really seen anything like it.
Speaking of things we've never seen anything like,
yep.
The other one, which is the final new mechanic and final mechanic for the set overall, is energy, which is weird and cool, and I think looks more complicated than it is.
Yeah, no, like it's a new resource for the game basically. So
which, when you say that sounds scary.
That does sound scary. Energy counters are gained by players by certain effects. So something like, I'm looking for the blue one, the one that scries 2 and draws 2. And
look for anything.
Energy. Anything that gives you energy. Let's look at Aether Theorist. There we go. This is 2 mana 1/3. When you enter the battlefield, you gain 3 energy, and you can tap him and pay an energy to scry 1. So you gain the energy. Now, if you're going to the pre-release, you may not have energy counters to play with.
You actually definitely won't,
because Wizards forgot to put them in the packs. But you can just use a dice or something.
Yep, or write it down or whatever. Just keep it next to your life total.
Energy counters don't go away at the end of the turn. They don't go away unless you spend them.
And they don't go away if your creature dies. They are bound to you as a player.
Yeah, similar to if anyone's played with the new Commander cards, experience counters. Very similar to that. Now you can spend energy as a cost to do certain things with certain cards.
Yeah, beyond what we've discussed here, it's basically all written on the cards.
Exactly.
Lots of the cards that make energy also use energy, so a lot of them are self-contained engines. Some of them, like Die Young.
Die Young is a removal spell that uses energy. It's 1 in a black. You target a creature,
and you get 2 energy.
You get 2 energy, and then you can pay any amount of energy to give that creature -1/-1 for each energy.
So you can pay all your energy from a different source you got, or if you perhaps you only need 1 of the energy, you get to keep the other one to bank for later.
Yep.
And it's just a very, very, very flexible resource.
Exactly.
The flavor idea being that you're supposed to be this inventor that's channeling all these weird things and making things happen and spinning all these plates all at once.
So, in general, like I say, this is not a mechanic that has a power level. This is a mechanic where you just look at the individual cards and see what they do.
Yes.
Now, more energy cards in a deck is going to be better than less. The more cards you have in your deck that use energy, the more powerful they all become.
Yes. That being said, something like Die Young, that's just a good card.
It's just 2 mana.
If that's the only energy card in your deck, fine.
Exactly. So, just bear in mind that the more energy cards you pick up as you go through the draft, the better.
Because they serve each other in the same in both directions, and the energy you produce for one card can be used for another, and then vice versa as well.
Now you can also just evaluate the cards as if that was the only energy you're going to get.
Which, when you're drafting, might be a bad idea.
Yeah, but later on, the first couple of picks go with that, but later on in the draft, you can start to look at what kind of energy resources you have available to you. Really, really cool mechanic. They apparently were going to put it in Mirrodin or something like that. So that's 10 years later they finally got into a set.
Yep, Mechanic E, as Mark Rosewater called it in our interview.
Now, the energy symbol is
Harry Potter lightning bolt.
The Harry Potter lightning bolt. So, like, the cards don't actually say the word energy on them. I don't believe they just use the energy symbol.
It's a little pentagon with
that. But that is what that is. That is the energy symbol. So those are all of our new mechanics, or mechanics at all. in, well, keyword mechanics, ability word mechanics in Kaladesh.
Yes.
Moving on a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of archetypes in the format.
And just the way the color pairs match up.
Yeah, now generally speaking, it doesn't look as... Now, it's hard to tell this from just looking at the cards, but it looks less sort of synergy-based than something like Shadows of Innistrad.
Yeah.
Closer to Eldritch Moon, where just any two colors are viable. But there are kind of a couple things that are pushing in certain directions. Blue seems to be the color that makes the most energy, and pairing it with red or green seems to be a pretty good energy-based deck. Whether that's a thing or not remains to be seen, but if you wanted to try something like that, blue and red or green would be probably the place to do it.
Yeah, it's hard to say now whether energy is the icing on the cake or the base of the cake.
Exactly, yeah, the sponge, if you will. The energy sponge. Blue-white, as usual, is just a Flyers deck, from the looks of it.
Yeah.
Flyers, tempo. Personally, whenever I go into a new format, if there's a blue-white Flyers deck, I'm delighted.
It's a comfort zone.
It's so familiar. You know, like the blue-white Flyers deck is just the blue-white Flyers deck, no matter what format it's in. But it looks totally viable here. That they've got a good uncommon, sort of Muldrifter-esque uncommon. I forget.
Cloud Blazer.
Cloud
420 Blazer.
420 Blazer.
Yeah.
I hardly even know her.
Actually, please, that's disgusting.
And then black with sort of white or blue.
As a controller,
control, a lot of removal a lot of good removal in black at sort of lower rarities.
The blue-black uncommon is like the most defensive card in the world.
Yeah, and black looks to be sort of a more toughness-based blocker, control, kill your stuff deck than...
well, I think it looks pretty aggressive. A lot of the black cards are rather aggressive. There's 4/2s and stuff that pair well with the red to make a good aggressive red deck.
I'm saying black, white, or black and white or black and blue.
Sure.
Would probably fall out as a control deck from the looks of the cards. Now, if you get a good black-white aggro deck, play the hell out of it.
Yeah.
You know? But this is just sort of where it looks like they're pushing a little bit. Now, other than those, try out all the color combinations. We don't know which ones are going to be viable yet. There's always some that complement each other more than others.
Yeah, they're never all equally good, but the delta between the best one and the worst one usually isn't too large.
No. Dennis, what do you think? If I were to ask you, do you think this is a sort of a more rares focused format or a more commons and uncommons focused format? A Prince or a Pauper format to borrow from limited resources? I
haven't read a ton of the rares, but the average power level of the commons and uncommons is very high.
It's a really powerful set. That's something to be aware of as well. It's going to throw off your card valuation.
If everything goes up by 20%, nothing went up by 20%.
Exactly, and you have to look at a card that would have been bonkers in another set and go, well, it's not actually as good when everything's this powerful.
Exactly.
So how much, again, that's something that's going to have to shake out, but it's something to be aware of in your first couple of drafts. The power level is just generally very high, so the bar for what's a bomb, for what's hyper efficient, is slightly higher.
Yes.
But I agree with you. I think the commons and uncommons are very powerful. There are some very powerful rares, but there's also, it's one of those formats where there's a lot of just weird rares.
Yeah.
A lot of just artifacts that do weird things. There's that life cannon one that...
I love the life cannon.
The life cannon's pretty cool. That's probably on screen now, I hope.
I hope so, because
I don't remember the name of it at all.
Yeah.
But there's lots of sort of weird...
Hey, what's that? You know that card? The card we were talking about? Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that's a good card.
Perfect.
But there's a lot of sort of weirdness in the rares, so... I would probably agree with you that it's probably going to be more commons and uncommons focused.
Yeah.
Less bomby, which I prefer. I always prefer that. A less bomby format.
Oh, for sure.
Now, going back to my notes for a moment.
This is that good old paper ruffle.
Oh, it's great, isn't it? But I normally go through the removal in the set, the ones kind of to be aware of.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through everything this time because I don't feel like that's terribly useful. I just want to bring some sort of highlights to your attention. So there's... Tidy Conclusion is the card I mentioned.
It's all wrapped up in a neat little package.
Exactly. 5 mana instant kill a creature. It has some text about artifacts that I don't really care about, but 5 mana common instant kill a creature. One of the better kill spells we've seen at common recently.
Because it's instant.
Just because it's instant. It's
we played Throttle.
Much of a difference before. Like instant versus sorcery is huge. We did play Throttle, and this is so much better than Throttle.
Yep.
And the fact that it's a common is a little awkward to me because it's like if you're going to pick a black card first, it's probably going to be this one.
Yeah.
You know, but it's just a really, really solid card, and it's kind of what's pushing me to think that a black control deck could be powerful. You know, because black also has a couple of uncommon. It has Essence Extraction and uncommon, but it also has Die Young, which we mentioned earlier.
Yep.
That's just a really hyper efficient removal spell. Just 2 mana, kill something with 2 toughness.
It can also be so much more.
Because if you have spare energy lying around from
I would play. That's like defeat. That's similar to the old card defeat.
Defeat? I don't know defeat.
You do know defeat.
Do I know defeat?
You do know defeat. Let me pull up defeat for you.
We're going to put defeat on the
I'll put it on the screen. MTG defeat.
Oh, yeah.
Destroy a target creature with power 2 or less.
Yeah, or a smother or something like
that. That's pretty close to Dying.
Yeah.
But Dying is much, 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 much better.
Sure.
I think it's way better.
I think it's probably better than defeat as well.
Oh, it's much better.
Well, you can't kill a 2/4.
Yes, it can.
With enough energy, sure.
Yeah.
This is getting a little into semantics here. But yeah, black's removal is at common very strong.
Yeah.
And then red just got a ton of weird ones.
Yes.
But a lot of them are uncommon. At common, it has Chandra's Pyrohelix and Flame Lash.
Chandra's Pyrohelix, which is just Twin Bolt.
Twin Bolt, but with a stupidly long name.
A much worse name. A much, much, much worse name. I don't know why Wizards does that all of the time. Now, usually I'm annoyed because they're wasting a name on a card that they already have a name for, but I don't think Chandra's Pyrohelix is a wasted name.
No.
And it's just a name that shouldn't have made it to print. No. I hate that name.
I'm going to call it Twin Bolt for as long as I play this format.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that there's a lot more artifact creatures in this format than you'd be used to seeing.
Yeah.
In your standard formats. So
which includes vehicles when they're crewed.
It does include vehicles when they're crewed. So be aware of things like the Fragmentize, which is the white artifact or enchantment removal spell.
And this may be the first time that Demolish might be okay.
Demolish as a playable card. It's just something to bear in mind. It's probably still correct to leave them in the sideboard at the beginning.
Fragmentize, I think I could play.
Just the 1 mana.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most people are going to have at least 1 artifact you can hit with it.
There's a naturalize effect in green. It's 2 in green. Yeah, there are actually.
There's 2 in green.
2 in a green instant. Destroy target artifact enchantment, you gain 2 life. I could main deck that. You're going to have a target for it.
I'd be nervous about main decking it until I played a couple games.
I mean, you hit a servo token.
You can hit a servo token, but I don't want to pay 3 mana to kill a servo.
But you gain 2.
You do gain 2. My strategy for this is going to be playing a couple of drafts, seeing how often I see artifact creatures.
I think I'm going to start keeping in the Fragmentize. Like, I'm going to the midnight pre-release tomorrow.
Okay.
I think I might, or whenever this goes up, probably today.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to probably main deck a Fragmentize, but liberally side it out, I think is where I am.
I'm probably going to start
slightly over the other.
Slightly on the other side of that line, but we're not too far from each other, you know?
We never are.
And then, green has its normal fight cards.
Has a really good fight card.
Has a really good fight
Nature's
card.
Way.
Nature's Way. It's Rabid Bite plus Vigilance and
Rabid Bite, which was already great.
Yep.
Love Rabid Bite.
Yep.
It's not even a fight, it's a bite.
Yep.
This is a bite, but it's a particularly vigilant trampoline bite.
Yeah, it's really, really strong card.
And then we have
Hunt the Week is
the Hunt of the Week.
Hunt of the Week.
It's like play the game.
So this is a Magic show that we're doing here.
My contract's up. I'm allowed to promote Blizzard's products now.
Blizzards.
Blizzards.
Man, that's a little confusing, isn't it?
No, it's not. They're distinct.
Hashtag ad. But yeah, so the removal, weirdly, like having a look there, other than in black, the removal doesn't seem to line up against the creatures too well. The creatures tend to look really overstated, and the removal doesn't seem to match that well.
I don't know if I agree with that. Twin Bolt is. I mean, that only hits smaller things.
It hits servos, which is nice.
But you have the 4 mana one that deals 2 to 2 things.
Yep,
that's really good. The black one's unconditional. Dion can kill theoretically anything. The creatures in green are huge, so the fight cards are really good. I think the removal
that's kind of making my point a little, though, isn't it?
I guess it is a little bit. I think the removal is actually. Like, the creatures are, like, for a long time, the creatures have been better than the removal.
Yep.
And I don't think it's changed that, but I think the removal is pretty good in this set.
It's coming close.
Yeah.
Speed of the format, any kind of early guesses?
I mean, we've seen a lot of good 2 and 3 drops that lends to a slightly more aggressive format, but there's also a lot of good 4 and 5 drops.
There's a lot of good 4 and 5 drops, a lot of decent control tools. Red got a board wipe.
So it's going to be difficult to see where that line ends up falling. But it doesn't look blazingly fast or glacially slow.
It looks pretty bang spot in the middle for me.
I think it's going to average out to be pretty.
If I had to guess now, I'd say we'd be slightly closer to a fast format than a slow format.
Sure, I think a 3 drop's more important.
Just because of the power level of the kind of the early game.
Yeah, people can run away from it.
Yeah. It's snowbally is the phrase. You know?
Yes.
And now I'm gonna get on my soapbox.
Do you
have my soapbox, Dennis?
You can stand on the chair if you want. I don't think it's good for the audio.
I'm gonna get on top of it. There's a card
There's a card. There's a lot of cards. There's one specific card
that has been printed in this format at uncommon in black. It is called Diabolic Tutor.
And Oisin is here to tell you about how much he hates the terrible art on Diabolic Tutor.
It is really bad art. It's awful. Look at it. Look at it. Look at it.
It could be worse. Could be Deadlock Trap.
That's fair.
Have you seen Deadlock Trap?
I haven't seen Deadlock Trap.
I'm going to pull it up for you, and I'm going to let you get back on your soapbox, but I really think this is worth...
Dennis is going to get on his soapbox. I'm going to climb off the soapbox for a second.
For a moment. I want to show you Deadlock Trap. Look at that art.
Chandra the rock gig.
And Nissa doing the Peyton Manning face in the back. It's awful.
That's really, really bad.
Now, Jason Rainbow, that name rings a bell. I think he's done art before. This art, I don't know what the direction was.
I'm sorry, Jason. But
what this looks like is, it looks like this card featured Chandra, and then they added in Nissa later on.
Photobombing her.
Later on. The card is whatever. That's actually okay. It's kind of like a... What's the card that taps things? The annoying card? Something about time. No, what's the card I'm thinking of? Oh, it's like a time. I keep having the phrase "time wrench" in my head, but I know
we're calling it time wrench.
I know there's not a card called time wrench. Hang on. Tumble Magnet. Tumble Magnet or Time Wrench.
Time Wrench, forever known as Time Wrench.
Anyway, so the art in this set is generally beautiful, but those two specific cards have that uncanny valley, rubbery, plasticky CGI look that looks like hot garbage. So mechanically, you have an actual soapbox that might be useful to some of our listeners.
Yeah, so most of our listeners, viewers, audience, whatever we call them, the windmill slammers, most of the people who have nothing better to do with their time, would know that you should not play Diabolic Tutor in draft.
But Oisin, it lets me get my best card.
But would your best card be your best card if it cost 4 more mana?
And yeah, no.
Well, that is.
But I could just play it the next turn.
But that's you've spent 4 extra. So let's say your best card is a Chandra. You opened the new Chandra, the really powerful. She's on screen now. The really powerful 4 mana Planeswalker. It's a bomb rare. And you think, I want a second copy of that in my red-black deck, so I'm going to play this Diabolic Tutor. But you don't have that. What you have is a 4-mana Chandra and an 8-mana Chandra.
Yes.
And she's not as good at 8 mana. I wouldn't play that card at 8 mana.
She's not as good if she's what, 4 black, red.
Yeah. So this is the problem. The versatility that you get from being able to search for any card in the situation is just not worth 4 mana investment. Yeah. It's not a card that you should ever put in your deck.
I don't know about ever.
I'm gonna go ahead and say ever. In a limited deck, I don't think you should ever put Diabolic Tutor.
What if you have a board wipe?
What if you have a board wipe? Actually, you know what? I might roll back what I just said. I think,
if you have Fumigate,
if you have a Fumigate, I think maybe I'd put a Diabolic Tutor.
If you have a black-white control deck with a Fumigate,
maybe I would put a Diabolic Tutor in my deck. For any other bomb, probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
But I think Fumigate might actually be the one exception.
I've toppled you with my time wrench.
I fell off my soapbox. You knocked me right off it. And then the only other thing left, I believe, is I wanted to just make note of a couple of cards that you should probably watch out for. These are not cards that are absurdly powerful, but it's just good to be aware that they exist in the format. And I've only got 2, unless you have any.
I can tell you now that I don't.
You have none? Okay, I have 2. For different reasons. One is make obsolete.
This was my suggestion when you asked me.
Yeah,
was make obsolete.
It's 2 and a black instant. Creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 till end of turn.
That is a weird effect to print at instant.
Yeah, really, really odd. What it is like a blanket combat trick.
Yes,
much better on defense. Yeah, because it's easier to play around it on blocks. But if your opponent sends a bunch of creatures at you. And you have a make obsolete, you're very likely to get a very good block out of this situation.
I mean, it immediately chews up all their servo tokens.
Yep.
And any X ones they happen to have lying around. But if your opponent attacks their 2/3/3s into your 2/2/3s, you eat their 2/2.
Yeah.
You eat both their guys.
So it can lead to some very strong blowouts, but it is play aroundable.
I think it is also main deckable.
Oh, it's 100% main deckable. I would main deck the hell out of that.
Because cards
in a slower defensive deck, I would main deck the hell out of it. In one of the black-blue or black-white control decks I was talking about earlier, I'd play as many as I could.
I think I'd play in a black-white aggressive deck as well. On attacks.
Oh,
just run over them.
I think it is less good on attacks.
It is certainly less
for
good.
sure less good on attacks. it's fine on attacks.
On attacks, it's comparable to Borrowed Malevolence.
Yeah, it's a lot like Borrowed Malevolence on attacks, but on defense, you can set up huge blowouts.
Now it is different because they have printed sorcery cards like this in the past, which means you can only use it as a board wipe, really.
Yeah.
But as a instant, that does give you the extra dimension of using it as a combat trick, like we said, while still wiping away all their X-Ones.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, so the reason I bring it up is if you are at the pre-release with a bunch of dudes that are only slightly bigger than your opponent's dudes, and they have 2 and a black up, just have a little think.
Or if they're in black and you're winning, and you're playing your fabricates, maybe just make the creature bigger.
Maybe just make the counters. And then the other one, for a slightly different reason, is Shrewd Negotiation. Switcheroo, we've seen before. This can do artifacts as well. The reason I bring it up is there's a lot of 1/1 servos lying around.
Yeah.
This is if you play a fabricate, this is just a control magic, basically.
Yeah.
And I don't think this card is just kind of rawly very powerful. Like in a random deck, it's probably not that great. But with fabricate cards and some very, very powerful artifacts in the format,
you watch out. You're going to get your Bombat Bazaar Barge stolen.
Your what?
Your Bombat Bazaar Barge.
But haven't you already drawn the card if you've played your Bombat Bazaar Barge?
I've already played the Bombat Bazaar Barge. Are they trying to steal my Bombat Bazaar Barge? I think I already drew the card off my Bombat Bazaar Barge.
When you played the Bombat Bazaar...
Yes!
Dennis wins.
Point to Dennis!
But this is more for the draft portion that this card is better than Switcheroo was in previous formats.
Because there's so many crappy artifacts.
Well, token artifacts and token creatures.
And, I mean,
your puzzle nuts.
You can steal their giant thing and give them your prophetic prism.
Yep, absolutely. So it's one to be aware of. Now, I need to check exactly how that's worded. Could you give them a prophetic prism and steal a creature?
Yeah, I believe so. Well, this would be one of those times we should pause the recording, isn't it?
It's probably one of those times where you should pause the recording.
Not doing it.
You're not doing it?
I'm not doing it.
You're not doing
Google that bad boy. Here it comes. I'll put up some stock footage. You enjoy some sweeping shots of some cliffs.
Yeah, no, yeah? You can absolutely
exchange
do that.
control of target artifact you control
target artifact
or creature. So
you need to give them an artifact. So this is the servos or the prophetic prism.
You need to give them an artifact. They have to get. But you can take a creature or an artifact.
Yeah, so it's stealing a creature by giving...
so I don't know if it's better than Switcheroo. That's harder. It's
harder to do, but with the fabricate cards and the...
I'm sure it's fine,
artifacts, the puzzle nuts, prophetic prism is a good example. It's easy to set up, I think, if you're drafting around it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be beneficial a lot of the time. I mean, you're not casting if it's not, I guess.
Yeah, but it's basically a mind control when you can support it.
Now, what's awkward is if you try to switcheroo, or whatever the hell this card's called...
And they kill your creature in response. Or kill your artifact in response.
Or they kill their own one. They still get your one.
No.
There's 2 targets.
When it goes to resolve... Exchange effects have special rules.
Okay.
When it goes to resolve, both permanents must be in play for them to be exchanged.
Okay.
So if either of them leave the battlefield before the card resolves...
The effect
will not happen.
I didn't think that was the case. That's important.
Yeah, that is important.
You know why I didn't think that's the case? I never played those cards.
I've never played
I don't like them.
Cards.
I don't like switcheroo. I don't like those cards.
That's fair enough.
Because if you're behind, if you're really behind, if you're getting absolutely run over and you've no creatures, it doesn't do anything.
But this is your prophetic prism or your servo token,
or your vehicle, I guess.
Yeah, you can.
You don't really want to give them a vehicle.
No,
I like my cars.
Can I have your guy? I'll give you my car.
I'll give you my car. That's slavery, and I think we've talked about this before off the show. It's not okay.
But that's kind of all. I've finished my notes.
I think we're good.
I've run out of notes.
This I'm hyper excited.
I'm gonna play the crap out of this.
I have a little bit of a special attachment to Kaladesh because they flew me out to PAX to promote it.
Yep.
I probably don't have to declare that anymore. But I'm genuinely excited about the set, and I don't have to put hashtag ad at the end of it anymore. Yeah, so it seems more genuine.
Hashtag ad.
Hashtag ad.
But thank you for tuning in. I hope this helps. I hope if you use any of our advice and crush your pre-release, give us a tweet.
And you can click
at Windmill Slam.
You know what I can do now?
What can you do?
Click over here to watch an episode of our game show. Maybe you'll like it.
Yeah.
Isn't that a cool thing that we can do now?
Is this the one from PAX that's going to be up there?
No, maybe. Who knows?
Who knows? One of the episodes of our game
I'll put up both. I have our normal game show I do with you and our other friends, and the special edition of the game show I did with the professor from Tulane Community College, Maria from Manage the Amateuring, and Gavin Verhey from Wizards R&D. Look at that. Look at all those things that are on the screen. Aren't I a genius? Thank you all for watching.
We'll see you next set.
See you next set or next week for our normal videos.
Yep.
You're terrible at this.